I came to trade for my mother, said the tiny alien girl to the human. The sun hung low in the sky of Xantara, casting long shadows over the busy marketplace. Xantara was a planet known for its vast trading network, where merchants and travelers from all corners of the galaxy came to exchange goods. Alien species of all shapes and sizes mingled with humans, exchanging wares, stories, and sometimes even weapons. It was a place where the rich and powerful bargained for rare items, and the desperate could be found trying to make a living. Captain Thorne stood at his stall, surveying the bustling crowd. He was a seasoned trader, a man who had seen the dark underbelly of the galaxy and survived. His reputation was well known in certain circles, and he knew how to get the best deal, no matter the odds. He had been to countless markets like this, but today something felt different. There was an energy in the air, something he couldn't quite place. He adjusted the strap of his jacket and glanced at the goods on display. High-tech weapons, rare materials, and artifacts from long-forgotten worlds. His eyes flicked over the crowd, noting the occasional glance in his direction, but most people were too busy to pay him much mind. The larger deals were taking place further down the market, where the wealthier traders gathered, but Thorne was content to work the edges, where the real deals happened. As he stood there, a small voice broke through the noise of the marketplace. "I came to trade for my mother." Thorne turned sharply, his hand instinctively moving to the sidearm at his hip. Standing before him was a tiny alien girl, no taller than his waist. She had pale blue skin that shimmered under the market's lights, her large, luminous eyes wide and full of a strange mix of determination and innocence. She wore simple clothes, clearly not from any known species in the galaxy, and her small hands clutched something in her grip, a small, intricately carved object that glowed faintly. For a moment, Thorne simply stared at her, unsure of what to make of the situation. He had dealt with plenty of strange creatures, but never one quite like this. She couldn't have been more than 10 or 11 by human standards, and she certainly didn't look like she belonged in this part of the market. Most people would have dismissed her as a lost child, but Thorne could see the fire in her eyes. There was something about her, something different. "Trade for your mother?" Thorne asked, his voice flat and skeptical. "What kind of game are you playing, kid?" The girl didn't flinch at the question. Instead, she stepped closer to him, her gaze unwavering. "My mother was taken. They've been holding her captive. I need help. I came to trade for her freedom." Thorne's brow furrowed. "Who took your mother? And what do you think I can do about it?" The girl didn't answer right away. Instead, she slowly held out the artifact in her hand. The object was small, about the size of a human fist, and made of a strange metal that Thorne didn't recognize. The carvings on it seemed to shift slightly when he looked at them, as though the patterns were changing, alive in some way. He had never seen anything like it. "This," she said quietly, "is part of something much bigger. My mother found them when she was exploring the outer reaches of the galaxy. They came after her. They want the rest of it. They have her and they'll kill her if I can't deliver it." Thorne's interest was piqued, despite himself. He had heard rumors of powerful ancient relics scattered across the galaxy, artifacts that could bend the very fabric of space and time. Some said they were remnants of civilizations far older than anything the galaxy had ever known. If this little girl was telling the truth, this artifact could be the key to something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. "I don't know what you think I can do," Thorne said, eyeing the artifact. "But if it's money you want, I'm not in the habit of doing charity work." The girl shook her head, her eyes never leaving his. "I don't want money. I want my mother, and I need someone who can help me get her back." Thorne sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. He could tell there was something genuine about her, but he couldn't afford to get wrapped up in some kid's rescue mission. He had his own problems, problems that had nothing to do with a helpless alien girl. But then the marketplace seemed to grow quieter. Thorne's hand instinctively went to his sidearm again. His eyes scanned the crowd, and for a brief moment he thought he saw movement out of the corner of his eye. A group of men had just entered the market, wearing dark, hooded cloaks and moving with a sense of purpose. Thorne's instincts kicked in. He recognized them immediately, mercenaries, the kind of men who worked for the highest bidder, no questions asked. They were heading directly toward him. Thorne took a step back, keeping an eye on the approaching group. His mind raced, calculating his next move. He didn't need to be in the middle of a firefight in the heart of the market. He needed to figure out what this girl's story was, and fast. The little alien girl seemed to sense his unease. "They've come for me," she whispered. "They know I'm here." "Who are they?" Thorne asked, his tone hardening. "They're the ones who took my mother," the girl said, "and they'll stop at nothing to get me too." Thorne cursed under his breath. There was no time to waste. He needed to get them both out of here before things got any worse. He glanced around the marketplace, his mind working quickly. The mercenaries were getting closer, and Thorne didn't want to find out how dangerous they were. "Come with me," Thorne said, his voice low but firm. "I'll help you get out of here, but we need to move fast." The girl nodded, clutching the artifact tightly in her hand as she followed Thorne through the maze of stalls. Thorne's heart was pounding, not just from the adrenaline of the situation, but from the nagging feeling that he had just stepped into something far bigger than he had expected. As they moved through the market, Thorne could feel the eyes of the mercenaries on them. He didn't know who these people were or what they wanted with the girl, but one thing was certain. They weren't just going to let her go without a fight. They reached Thorne's ship, the Vanguard, in record time, and Thorne wasted no time getting them both aboard. The moment the hatch closed behind them, he ordered the crew to prep for launch. "Where to?" his co-pilot Juno asked, her voice steady but with a hint of concern. "We're leaving," Thorne said, strapping himself into his seat, "and we're not going back to the market." The engines roared to life, and the ship began to rise from the ground, quickly gaining altitude. Thorne glanced over at the girl, who was sitting silently beside him. Her eyes were focused on the artifact, her small fingers tracing the glowing carvings. Thorne didn't know what he had just gotten himself into, but one thing was certain. This wasn't going to be an ordinary job. The Vanguard hummed quietly as it cut through the vastness of space, the stars outside stretching into long streaks as the ship accelerated toward the outer reaches of the galaxy. Inside the cockpit, Captain Thorne sat with a grim expression, his hands on the controls, his mind racing. The girl, whom he had come to know as Lyra, sat silently beside him, clutching the strange artifact with both hands. Thorne had always prided himself on staying level-headed in situations like this. He had navigated the galaxy for years, dealt with smugglers, pirates, and bounty hunters, and never once had he been caught off guard. But there was something about Lyra's story that gnawed at him, something that didn't quite sit right. A child, alone in the galaxy, on a mission to rescue her mother from a deadly syndicate. It seemed impossible. Yet here she was, the artifact in her hands glowing faintly as if it had a life of its own. "What exactly is this thing?" Thorne asked, breaking the silence. He gestured toward the artifact she was holding. "This relic, you said it's important." Lyra looked at the object in her hands, her expression softening for the first time since they had met. Her fingers traced the patterns carved into the surface, and for a moment she seemed lost in thought. "It's part of something bigger," she said quietly. "My mother found it while she was working on an archaeological project in the outer systems. She said it was the key to something ancient, something powerful." Thorne leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "What kind of something powerful?" Lyra's eyes met his, her gaze steady. "My mother wasn't just an archaeologist. She was studying energy manipulation, ways to harness and control the fundamental forces of the universe. She discovered the artifact while she was researching an ancient civilization that had mastered these powers. But the artifact, it's only part of something much larger." My mother believed that if she could unlock its secrets, she could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Thorn frowned. And that's why these people took her. Yes, Lyra nodded. They want the rest of it. My mother had already found part of the artifact's key, something that could harness the power of entire star systems. The Syndicate. They want to use it as a weapon. Thorn took a deep breath, his mind racing. A weapon that could harness the power of entire star systems. That was no small matter. If the Syndicate got their hands on it, there was no telling what kind of destruction they could unleash. And if this little girl was right, her mother was the only one who could stop them. He glanced over at Lyra. Despite her small size and the innocence in her eyes, there was a quiet strength about her. She wasn't just some helpless child. She was someone who had already been through more than most adults could handle, and yet here she was, determined to save her mother and herself. "How do you know they're still holding her?" Thorn asked. "If they've got the key, why haven't they just destroyed her already?" Lyra's expression darkened. "They've been using her to decode the artifact. She's smart, smarter than anyone they've ever had working for them. But she's also been trying to sabotage their efforts. She's doing everything she can to destroy the weapon from the inside, but it's dangerous. They've threatened me. If she doesn't cooperate, they'll kill me." Thorn's jaw tightened. That's a hell of a thing for a mother to do. Lyra didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned her eyes back to the artifact. Her fingers moved slowly over the surface, as if she was communicating with it in a way Thorn didn't understand. For a moment there was a strange hum in the air, a soft vibration that seemed to come from the object itself. "What are you doing?" Thorn asked, his voice tense. Lyra didn't look up. "I'm trying to feel it. It's alive." My mother always said it had a connection to something beyond our understanding. She thought it might be a piece of something ancient, something sentient, but I don't know what it wants, what it needs. Thorn leaned back in his seat, a sense of unease settling in his stomach. "That's unsettling," he muttered. "So, what now? We've got this thing, but we don't know what it does, and we've got a bunch of mercenaries trying to catch us. I don't know how much longer we can keep running." Lyra's gaze lifted from the artifact, her eyes steady. "We can't keep running. We need to get to my mother. The Syndicate has a base in the outer system on an abandoned mining colony. My mother's research lab is there. That's where they're holding her." Thorn's mind raced. The outer system was a dangerous place. Few people ever ventured there, and even fewer came back. The mining colonies had been abandoned for a reason. Nobody wanted to deal with the hazardous conditions. But if Lyra was right and her mother was being held there, they didn't have a choice. "You're sure about this?" Thorn asked. "I mean, it's a long shot. We could be walking straight into a trap." Lyra nodded. "I'm sure. We don't have time to waste. Every second we wait, they're closer to unlocking the full power of the artifact. They could launch the weapon at any moment." Thorn stared at her, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had always been a man who dealt in the black and white realities of trade, but this was something entirely different. The stakes were higher than anything he'd ever faced before. Lives were on the line, and he was about to risk everything to help this girl save her mother. He exhaled slowly. "All right," he said, his voice low. "We're going to do this. We'll make a run for it, but we need a plan. And we need to move fast." Lyra's face brightened, a flicker of hope crossing her features. "Thank you," Thorn nodded. "Don't thank me yet. We've got a long way to go." As the Vanguard sped through space toward the outer system, Thorn's thoughts turned inward. This mission had already gone from bad to worse, and they hadn't even arrived yet. The more he learned about the artifact and the Syndicate, the more he realized just how deep this went. He wasn't just fighting to save a mother and child. He was stepping into a galactic power struggle, one that could change the course of history. And if Lyra's mother was as brilliant as she seemed, the Syndicate wouldn't stop until they had everything they wanted. Thorn knew he had to stop them, but with every passing moment the danger was growing, and he wasn't sure they were ready for what lay ahead. He glanced over at Lyra, who was staring out the window, her eyes distant. He wondered if she fully understood what she was getting into. But then again, maybe she did. After all, she was the one holding the key to the galaxy's future. The silence between them grew, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines and the soft vibrations of the artifact in Lyra's hands. Thorne's eyes flicked back to the controls, and his grip tightened. They were headed straight into the heart of enemy territory, and there was no turning back. The outer system was a harsh, barren region of space where the stars barely pierced the endless blackness. The planets here were dry and desolate, long abandoned by their inhabitants, their surface scarred by centuries of mining and neglect. There was little of value left to find, just a few derelict stations and ghostly outposts scattered across the void. It was the perfect place for those who wanted to hide from the law, or from enemies who would stop at nothing to find them. As the Vanguard approached the edge of the system, the mood inside the ship grew tense. Thorne sat at the controls, his eyes focused on the approaching asteroid field. His mind was on high alert, anticipating every possible threat. The mercenaries who had followed them from the market would be looking for them by now, and the last thing Thorne needed was to be caught in the middle of an ambush. He needed to get in and out of the mining colony as quickly as possible. Lyra was seated beside him, her eyes fixed on the holographic map displayed in front of her. The artifact in her lap hummed softly, a low vibration that seemed to grow stronger as they neared their destination. Thorne had never been one for superstition, but there was something undeniably unsettling about the way the artifact reacted. It felt alive, and it seemed to be guiding them, leading them toward the abandoned mining station where Lyra's mother was being held. "We're almost there," Thorne said, his voice steady but edged with a hint of impatience. He didn't like how quiet Lyra had been. Since they left the market, she hadn't said much, her mind clearly preoccupied with the mission. He understood her focus, but the silence between them was starting to wear on him. Lyra didn't look up. "I know." Thorne glanced at her. "You're sure this is the right place? I mean, it's an old mining colony. There's nothing left here except rust and broken equipment." "It's here," Lyra said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "My mother's lab is buried deep inside the old refinery. She told me. She told me they'd keep her there until the artifact was complete. She's been trying to stop them, but I don't think she has much time left." Thorne's gaze softened. He didn't know what it was like to lose a parent, but he could imagine the pain, the desperation Lyra must have felt. This girl had been through more than most adults could handle, and yet she was still holding it together, still determined to save her mother. Thorne respected that, but he also knew that saving her mother wouldn't be easy. If the Syndicate had her, they would stop at nothing to keep her and the power of the artifact under their control. "All right," Thorne said, "we'll approach from the far side of the station. It'll be harder for them to spot us that way. Stay low, stay quiet. We don't want to alert anyone to our presence." Lyra nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "I'll be ready." The asteroid field ahead was dense, with large chunks of rock floating aimlessly through space. Thorne maneuvered the Vanguard carefully, weaving in and out of the obstacles with practiced ease. He'd flown through worse, but the narrow, twisting paths of the asteroid field were always nerve-wracking. He kept his speed slow, making sure they wouldn't attract any attention from the enemy. They needed to make it inside the station undetected. As they passed through the last of the asteroids, the mining colony came into view. It was a massive structure, a rusted relic from a time long gone. The once bustling mining facility was now abandoned, its walls covered in grime and age. The lights flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows on the barren surface. The place looked like a ghost town, but Thorne knew better than to trust appearances. They were close now. Thorne spoke into the comms system, giving orders to the crew to prepare for landing. He and Lyra would make the final approach on foot, moving quietly through the old tunnels to avoid detection. The rest of the crew would stay behind, ready to provide backup if needed, but they couldn't afford to make a loud entrance. The ship's landing gear touched down with a soft thud, and Thorn quickly powered down the engines. He turned to Lyra, giving her a sharp nod. "Stay close to me," he said, "and don't make a sound unless I tell you to." Lyra's eyes met his, her small frame tense with anticipation. She was ready. Thorn could see it in the way her hands gripped the artifact, her body coiled like a spring. He had to admit, there was something admirable about her determination. He just hoped it would be enough. The hatch of the Vanguard opened with a hiss, and a blast of cold air rushed inside. The atmosphere outside the ship was thin, the air stale and dry. Thorn's breath fogged in the cold as he stepped onto the rocky surface, scanning the area for any sign of movement. Lyra followed close behind, her steps light and sure. They moved quickly and quietly, making their way toward the entrance to the mining station. The old doors were barely hanging on their hinges, rusted and creaking with every gust of wind. Thorn pushed them open with a grunt, and they slipped inside. The station was even more decayed than it had appeared from the outside. The walls were covered in grime, and the floors were littered with debris. It was clear that no one had cared for this place in years. But as Thorn led Lyra deeper into the station, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and every instinct he had screamed at him to be cautious. They moved through the corridors, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Lyra was silent, her eyes darting around as if expecting something to jump out at them at any moment. Thorn kept his senses sharp, his hand resting near the grip of his sidearm. He had no idea what kind of security the syndicate had left in place, but he wasn't going to take any chances. They finally reached a large chamber at the heart of the facility. The door to the lab was ahead, but it was guarded. Two armed mercenaries stood outside, their weapons raised and ready. They were talking in low voices, unaware of the intruders. Thorn glanced at Lyra, who was already moving toward a nearby vent shaft. She didn't need to be told what to do. With a small, determined nod, she crawled into the shaft, disappearing from sight. Thorn watched her go, then turned his attention back to the guards. There had to be a way to get past them. He crouched low, using the shadows to his advantage, moving closer to the guards. He could take them out quickly, but it would make noise, and he didn't want to alert anyone else. Instead, he decided to try something else: distraction. A low hum filled the room as Thorn activated a small device on his wrist, sending out a pulse that triggered the station's old security alarms. The sound echoed through the station, and the guards immediately sprang into action, turning to face the source of the noise. Thorn used the confusion to slip past them and reach the lab door. He paused, waiting for Lyra to reappear. Moments later, the vent shaft opened and Lyra slid out, her face pale but focused. She quickly joined Thorn, and together they approached the door. Thorn had no idea what lay beyond it, but he could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was it. Lyra's mother was just on the other side. Thorn opened the door slowly, the hinges creaking in protest. Inside, the lab was dimly lit, filled with old machines and scattered equipment. But there, in the center of the room, sat Lyra's mother. She was hunched over a console, her face gaunt and pale, her hands trembling as she worked. Lyra stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom," the woman looked up, her eyes widening in shock. "Lyra, how did you get here?" Lyra ran to her mother's side, her small hands reaching out. "I came to get you, Mom. We have to go. They're going to use the artifact. We can stop them." Her mother's face softened with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "It's too dangerous. They won't stop until they have everything." Thorn stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "We'll make sure they don't get it. We'll stop them." But as the words left his mouth, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. The mercenaries were coming. The moment Thorn stepped into the lab, he knew there was no going back. The soft blue glow of the room illuminated the walls, revealing strange equipment and piles of old research. It was a relic of a time long past, but Lyra's mother, pale, gaunt, and more tired than Thorn had ever imagined, was alive, and that was all that mattered right now. Lyra rushed to her mother's side, her small hands trembling as she reached out. "Mom," she whispered, "we're here. We're going to get you out." Lyra's mother, a once strong and confident woman, looked up from her work, her face filled with surprise and sorrow. "Lyra, you shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's too dangerous. They won't stop until they have the artifact. They'll kill you both." Thorn stood silently by the door, his hand on his sidearm, watching the reunion. He didn't know what to say. He had seen a lot of desperation in his time, but nothing like this. A mother willing to risk everything for her daughter, even while trapped in the heart of the Syndicate's stronghold. It was something that hit him deeper than he expected. The more he learned about Lyra and her mother, the more he realized how much was at stake. "You're wrong, Mom," Lyra said, her voice filled with determination. "We're not leaving without you. We can stop them. We can end this." Her mother's expression softened, but the worry in her eyes didn't fade. "You don't understand. This isn't just about us. This artifact, it's more than we thought. I didn't just discover it, I activated it. And now they know how to control it. They can bend the fabric of space and time, manipulate energy itself. If they succeed, they'll have the power to destroy entire systems. And if you have it, they'll come after you next." Thorn's heart sank. He'd known the Syndicate was dangerous, but this was a new level of threat. He had heard rumors about weapons that could alter the very laws of physics, but he never imagined they could actually exist. Now he understood why the mercenaries were so desperate to capture this artifact. If they were able to harness its power, they wouldn't just control the galaxy, they'd own it. "We need to destroy it," Thorn said, his voice tight with resolve. "Whatever it is, whatever it does, we can't let them have it. We'll take you out of here, and we'll find a way to destroy it before they can use it." Lyra's mother looked at him, then down at the artifact that was still sitting on the console in front of her. Her fingers hovered over it, as if unwilling to touch it. "It's not that simple," she said, her voice shaking. "The artifact, it's alive. I don't know how to explain it. It has a consciousness. It responds to its surroundings, to its users. When I activated it, I triggered something I can't control." Thorn took a step forward, his mind racing. "We don't have time for explanations," he said. "They're coming. We have to act now." Just as the words left his mouth, the sound of footsteps echoed through the corridor. The mercenaries had arrived. Thorn didn't need to hear any more. He was already moving, his instincts kicking in. He turned to Lyra's mother and grabbed her by the arm. "Get up. We're leaving." Lyra's mother hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She stood shakily, still looking at the artifact with a mixture of fear and regret. Thorn couldn't blame her. Whatever that thing was, it had caused her nothing but trouble. But now it was up to him to make sure the Syndicate didn't get their hands on it. He wasn't going to let them use it to destroy everything. Lyra stepped up beside them, her small hand gripping her mother's. "We're together now," she said. "We can do this." The door to the lab suddenly slid open, and the mercenaries flooded in. There were 5 of them, large, imposing figures in combat gear, their weapons raised and ready. They didn't hesitate for a second before taking aim at Thorn and the others. "Step away from the console," one of the mercenaries barked. "That artifact belongs to the Syndicate." "Hand it over." Thorn's eyes narrowed. He knew a standoff when he saw one. The mercenaries weren't here to negotiate. They were here to take what they wanted by force. He was about to reach for his weapon when he heard a soft, strange hum from the artifact. The mercenaries froze. "What the hell is that?" one of them muttered, his eyes wide. Thorn's hand shot out, pulling Lyra and her mother behind him. "Get down," he shouted. The artifact glowed brighter and the hum grew louder, filling the room with a deep, vibrating sound. For a moment, it felt like the entire station was shaking. The mercenaries looked at each other, unsure of what was happening. Then, without warning, the artifact released a burst of energy, a wave of light and sound that knocked everyone off their feet. Thorn was thrown to the floor, his vision spinning. His ears rang from the force of the blast, but as he struggled to his feet, he could see the mercenaries scrambling, their weapons useless in the face of the artifact's power. Lyra, her eyes wide in shock, stepped forward. "It's reacting to them," she said, her voice trembling. Thorn pulled himself up, using the console for support. His heart was pounding and the air was thick with tension. The mercenaries were disoriented, but they weren't out of the fight yet. They started to recover, scrambling for cover as they readied their weapons again. "You're not taking it," Thorn snarled, his hand on his blaster. "It's over." But before he could make another move, the artifact pulsed again. This time, the entire room seemed to shudder as if reality itself were warping. The mercenaries looked at each other in panic, but one of them stepped forward, his hand raised. "Stop! Don't touch it!" he yelled. It was too late. The artifact's power surged again, and suddenly the mercenaries were thrown backward, their bodies colliding with the walls with a sickening thud. One of them tried to scramble to his feet, but the force of the energy wave kept him pinned to the floor. Lyra stood there, wide-eyed, staring at the artifact. Her mother looked just as stunned. "It's not just a weapon," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "It's a living force. It wants to be free." Thorn took a deep breath, trying to calm the adrenaline rushing through his veins. This was not a battle he had planned for. He had come to rescue a mother and her daughter. But now it was clear. The artifact itself was part of the battle. It wasn't just a tool to be used. It was a force that could change everything. "We need to get out of here," Thorn said, his voice urgent. "We can't stay. The Syndicate will send more men and we won't be able to stop them again." Lyra's mother nodded, her eyes never leaving the artifact. "But we can't just leave it here. It's too dangerous." Thorn looked at the mercenaries, still groaning on the floor, their weapons scattered. He had no intention of letting the Syndicate get their hands on this thing, but he didn't know how to destroy it, if it could even be destroyed. "Then we take it with us," Thorn said, his voice steady. "And we get out of here. Now." The lab was now a battleground. The air was thick with the dust kicked up by the artifact's energy pulses, and the mercenaries were scrambling to recover. Thorn's mind raced as he quickly glanced at Lyra and her mother. They were in danger. This entire station could collapse at any moment and the Syndicate would send more troops. It was time to leave. "Get ready," Thorn said, his voice low but firm. He moved to the door, checking the hallway outside for any signs of movement. The mercenaries had been thrown back by the artifact's last wave, but they wouldn't stay down forever. They needed to make it to the vanguard before more forces arrived. Lyra's mother stood still for a moment, her eyes locked on the artifact. "We can't just take it," she said, her voice filled with a quiet urgency. "It's too dangerous. The artifact is more than just a weapon, it's a force of nature. If we move it too quickly, it could—" "Listen," Thorn interrupted, his patience thinning. "We don't have the luxury of waiting around. We need to move, or we'll all be dead before we even reach the ship." Lyra stepped forward, her small hands trembling as she gripped her mother's arm. "Mom, please, we have to trust him. We're running out of time." Her mother looked down at her, the weight of the decision clear in her eyes. Then, with a heavy sigh, she nodded. "All right," she said softly. "We'll go, but we need to be careful. The artifact. It's reacting to our emotions. If we panic, it might spiral out of control." Thorn didn't have time to question her words. He turned to the door, pushing it open slowly. The hallway beyond was quiet, but he knew that wouldn't last long. They had to keep moving. The mercenaries, though temporarily disoriented, would eventually regroup. The only thing Thorn could count on was his speed and the element of surprise. He motioned for Lyra and her mother to follow him. They moved quickly through the narrow corridors, their footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The station was eerily silent now, as if it were holding its breath. Thorn's hand rested on the grip of his blaster as he led the way. He wasn't sure how much more of this station could take before it began to fall apart. The last pulse of energy from the artifact had shaken the very walls, and there was a low hum in the air, like the station itself was groaning under the strain. Ahead, the entrance to the docking bay loomed, a large, rusted door that looked barely functional. The Vanguard was just beyond it, parked in a small clearing waiting for them. But as they neared the door, Thorn's instincts screamed that something was wrong. "They're here," he muttered under his breath. Lyra's mother froze. "We're not going to make it." Thorn didn't wait for another word. He shoved the door open with all his strength, the metal screeching as it moved. He stepped through first, his eyes scanning the area. The docking bay was dim, but it was clear, no mercenaries in sight. Yet something was off. The silence was too perfect. It felt like a trap. "Move," Thorn ordered, motioning for Lyra and her mother to hurry. He didn't have time to question the stillness. They had to get to the ship now. As they crossed the bay, Thorn's heart pounded in his chest. Every sound seemed amplified, the faint creak of the station, the soft shuffle of their boots on the cold floor. The Vanguard sat 100 yards away, its engines quiet but ready. The ship could be their salvation, or their tomb. They were almost halfway across when the first shot rang out. Thorn heard the sharp crack of energy blasts splitting the air, followed by the unmistakable hiss of a plasma bolt striking the metal floor beside him. He spun, his hand reaching for his blaster instinctively, but the mercenaries had already begun to close in on their position. They had been waiting for them to show themselves. "You didn't think you'd just walk away, did you?" The lead mercenary sneered, stepping out from behind a stack of crates. He was a tall, heavily armored figure, with a scar running down his face that made him look even more menacing. "We don't have time for this," Thorn muttered, leveling his blaster at the mercenary. He pulled the trigger without hesitation, sending a burst of energy that knocked the mercenary backward. The others weren't far behind, their weapons raised and their eyes locked on their targets. The firefight exploded into chaos. Thorn dove for cover, his mind moving faster than his body as he calculated his next move. Lyra and her mother were behind him, but they were exposed. The artifact still clutched in Lyra's hands began to hum again, louder this time. The air felt charged, heavy with energy. "Get to the ship," Thorn shouted, his voice barely audible over the crack of blaster fire. "I'll cover you." Lyra didn't hesitate. She pulled her mother behind her, urging her to run. Thorn laid down a wall of fire, his shots hitting their marks and sending the mercenaries scattering for cover. He knew they couldn't stay here for long. The station was already beginning to shake, the walls creaking and groaning under the strain of the artifact's power. It wouldn't be long before everything collapsed. He caught a glimpse of Lyra's mother, her face filled with fear and determination as she sprinted toward the ship. The artifact in her daughter's hands glowed brighter with every step they took. Thorn couldn't understand it. What made the artifact so powerful? Why was it reacting to them like this? He didn't have time to figure it out. He had to keep them safe. Just as Lyra and her mother reached the ship's hatch, the mercenaries regrouped, launching a fresh wave of fire in their direction. Thorn dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the deadly plasma shots. He rolled behind a stack of crates, his heart pounding in his chest. "Thorn, get on the ship," Lyra screamed, her voice shaking with panic. "We can't wait any longer." Thorn's instincts screamed at him to run, but he couldn't. Not yet. He needed to make sure they were safe. The ship's hatch began to close, but as Thorn made his move to join them, a sharp pain exploded in his side. He stumbled, falling to one knee as the world tilted dangerously. The mercenaries had gotten a shot off. Blood trickled down his side, and he gritted his teeth against the pain. He couldn't afford to lose focus. He forced himself to his feet, his vision swimming, and made his way to the ship's entrance. The mercenaries weren't far behind, and Thorn knew he had seconds, maybe less, before they overwhelmed him. Just as he reached the hatch, the artifact pulsed again, stronger than ever before. The entire station seemed to shudder, the walls vibrating violently. Thorn had no idea what was happening, but in that moment everything went still. The mercenaries stopped, their weapons lowered as they stared in awe at the light now emanating from the artifact. Thorn, barely able to stay on his feet, looked back at Lyra, who was standing just inside the hatch, her hands trembling as she held the artifact. "What's happening?" he gasped. "I don't know," Lyra said, her voice strained. It's reacting to us, to all of us. It wants something." The light grew brighter, pulsing in waves that seemed to echo through the station. Then, with a final, deafening hum, the artifact released a surge of energy that sent a shockwave rippling out from it, knocking everyone, mercenaries and Thorn alike, backward. The last thing Thorn saw before everything went dark was the vanguard lifting off the ground, the mercenaries scattered and dazed, and the station starting to crumble around them.